Welcome to DC Shmooze with OU Advocacy. We're getting to know some of our nation's elected leaders and learning about their policy goals. Join us as we dive in.
Hi, my name is Nathan Diamond, Executive Director of the Orthodox Union Advocacy Center, and I'm here on Capitol Hill for OU's DC Shmooze with Congresswoman Grace Meng, representative of Queens, New York, now starting her sixth term in Congress. Congratulations on that. And we'd like to kick this off by letting you introduce yourself to the OU community in your district and beyond, and remind them or introduce them to where you're from and how you got involved in politics.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Grace Meng, proud to represent Queens, New York. I was born and raised in Queens. I am the daughter of immigrants who came to this country in the early 70s. Never thought I would go into politics. My parents worked in a restaurant for most of my childhood and later on owned their own restaurant and became small business owners. Fast forward a little bit, I realized that politics and civics were a great way for people to be able to help a lot of people at once. And I'm just so proud to be able to represent parts of Queens, from Forest Hills to Rego Park to Kew Garden Hills to Jackson Heights, in the United States Congress. And just so honored to work with amazing organizations like the OU and leaders like Nathan.
You're very kind. We love partnering with you. We worked on a very important bill, your first term in Congress, in response to Hurricane Sandy, when FEMA wouldn't help churches and synagogues rebuild after natural disasters. And we were able to change that policy thanks to your leadership. We're so grateful for that. You have a particular connection to the Jewish community, having gone to Yeshiva University, or at least part of it. What would you like to share about that and what you learned as being part of the Yeshiva University community?
Sure. I attended law school at Yeshiva University's Cardozo School of Law, and that was many years ago. So I attended law school, and, I became elected to the New York State Assembly in 2008. And that was around the first time when I took my first ever trip to Israel with the JCRC of New York. So that was my very first trip. A few years later, fast forward a little bit, when I was running for Congress, my maternal grandmother, who I call my political rabbi, gave me a tattered black and white booklet. And I take a look at the booklet. It says, "The Jews in Shanghai." And I didn't know that piece of history. And my grandmother, who did not go to high school or college, obviously never ran for office, said to me that our two communities are bonded for life. And that was something, without knowing the history and without her knowing really my district, she didn't know the district lines, was something that continues to impact me to this day. And as someone who grew up in the church, and probably one of the few Asian Lutherans, which is pretty much the first denomination that broke off from Catholicism, my faith is very important to me. My grandma still calls me almost every week to check if I went to church. And so working with our shared communities, growing up in the faith community, attending parochial religious school for part of my childhood, has really impacted the way that we serve our district.
Sadly, in recent years, both the Asian American community and the Jewish American community has had to confront a rise in hate crimes targeting our respective community members. What have you found in terms of the communities coming together and maybe common responses that we have or need to have, or maybe even what each community needs to learn from one another in responding to this situation?
As painful and traumatic as the past few years have been for the Asian American community, I will say that one of the bright lights has been watching different communities come together. In New York City, it's a very diverse community. Many different groups coexist, work, live side by side. but sometimes they don't really know each other and they don't really understand each other's lived experiences. And when a lot of these incidents were happening way in the beginning, some of the first leaders and allies who came to me and who came to the rallies about stopping anti-Asian hate, stopping Asian hate, were our Jewish community leaders. And they would just show up, they would email, they would reach out with suggestions and words of comfort. And I just thought that that was just an amazing testament to how our communities have so much more in common than they have different from each other. When we were crafting the COVID-19 hate crimes law, which was signed into law by President Biden, some of the Jewish leaders across the country came to us with tips and with ideas on what we needed to do as a country to eradicate hate and discrimination, not just for Asian Americans, but how we can, address the issue of anti-Semitism. And hate is hate. When you have and see hate towards one group, it can easily be targeted towards a different group on the next day. And so it's so important. And I've been just so heartened to see different communities come together, especially the Jewish and the Asian community during this time.
Thank you for that. We really appreciate your leadership and support in that arena as well. You mentioned your first trip to Israel. I know you've been back several times since. How do you see the U.S.-Israel relationship? Where we are right now with President Biden now in office for half of his term and a new government in Israel coming into office. The Secretary of State is actually visiting the region as we sit here today. How do you see the relationship and support for Israel in this new Congress?
Well, I am very proud to be a pro-Israel supporter, and that means speaking up when we are seeing incidents, of anti-Semitic incidents. It also means using my role as vice chair of the State and Foreign Ops Subcommittee on the Appropriations Committee. This is the committee that funds all government programs and agencies, including delivering aid to Israel. This aid is not just about defense. It is literally about protecting the families and protecting democracy in the state of Israel. And this issue is something that should never, as it sometimes has been, should never become treated as a political football. And that's my role as a Democrat. It's my role as a member of the subcommittee. And I will say that in my trips to Israel, and I think everyone should take a trip to Israel, because we can talk about the importance of aid. We can talk about the threats that families and children go through and endure every day, but not until you go and hear from people on the ground the dangers that they face and why it's important for the United States to provide support and aid to protect the families on the ground, and also to see how different communities coexist in the state of Israel is something that you can't fully understand and feel until you visit.
Since you mentioned your role on appropriations, your important role, one of the things we've heard with the new Republican majority in the House is their intention to cut spending. And that could have impact on the entire federal government and everything it does, obviously. But just touching on what you were just talking about, what do you think what is your forecast for how foreign aid and aid to Israel might be impacted by what the Republicans are talking about in terms of cutting spending?
Well, hopefully it should not be impacted, and hopefully we will not entertain any sort of conditions that occasionally that topic comes up. The money that we have given, especially money that is part of agreements like the MOU, we have committed to as a country, whether the Republicans are in charge or whether Democrats are in charge. So this is something that should not be partisan at all, and without condition.
That's great, and we look forward to working with you to make sure that's the case. On a lighter note, I think both of our communities have so many rich cultural, aspects and traditions, and of course, food plays a central role. The OU, among other things, is the world's largest kosher food certifier. So, having gone to Yeshiva University's law school and living in Queens, etc., do you have a favorite Jewish food?
I do like hamantashen because usually people make both of these foods homemade and they give it to me. And latkes, unless they're hot, straight out of the kitchen, it's not as yummy. But hamantashen keeps a little bit longer.
A big debate within the Democratic Party between two stalwart friends. Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman Grace Meng, for spending time with us. This has been a short schmooze here in D.C. I'm Nathan Diamond of the OU Advocacy Center.
Thank you.